one other thing that I think people are sort of sweeping under the rug is how good this team will be defensively. Just historically, and I think Magic fans really started to tune into this, at least younger, newer Magic fans started to tune into this with Steve Clifford. Steve Clifford's emphasis on the defensive end of the basketball and just always talking about the defensive rating, saying that historically, if you are top 10 in defensive rating in the NBA, you have a very good chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I believe every team that finished in the top 10 in defensive rating in the NBA last year made the playoffs.
Except for maybe
when we are
the
talking
Knicks,
about,
right?
I believe the Knicks finished outside of the top 10. I think they finished 11th.
Okay.
The last week of the season, they were in the top 10, and then just kind of at the end, they went ahead and they actually fell outside of the top 10. So let's look at this. Boston, Golden State, Phoenix, Miami, Cleveland, Memphis, Dallas. The Clippers did not. The Clippers were 8th. The Toronto Raptors and the Utah Jazz. But weren't the Clippers in the play-in game? The Clippers were the 9th seed. Realistically, if we were going back to a handful of seasons ago without the play-in game, the Clippers would have made the playoffs.
Yeah.
So the top 10 teams all made the postseason. You're right there in the mix. So after the All-Star break, the Orlando Magic were 7th in the league. It's a 22-game stretch, so it's a pretty decent sample size. They were 7th in the entire NBA in defensive rating. You are telling me you're bringing back Markelle Fultz 25 to 30 minutes a game. If you're bringing back Jonathan Isaac, even if he's not 100%, 70, 80% of Jonathan Isaac is still better than some of the guys that we were throwing out there in games last year, like Ignas Brazdeikis, Admiral Schofield, that was playing in some of these games, especially towards the end of the year.
Yep.
This team, the floor, in my opinion, should be a top 10 defensive team in the NBA.
Yeah.
History shows us most of the time that's good enough to make the playoffs.
Well, and that's the other thing, though, is it's not just defensively that this team is going to show improvement. And this team is not going, this team is going to be legitimately a great NBA defensive team next year. It all comes down to the offensive side of the ball, in my opinion. But you've got Markelle Fultz, who is going to provide for these guys in terms of, getting them open looks, going back to that high-value assist analytic. And then you've got Paolo, who finally is a guy that Magic added to the roster who can create his own shot. Not only can he create his own shot, he's going to have defenders thinking about also his ability to do what Markelle does in terms of, get the ball where it needs to be for his guys to get an easy shot. The vision on him is incredible. It was underrated. I'm sure it's still underrated by the casual fan for sure who did not tune into Summer League. It's hard not to get excited about the future of this team, and it's even hard in the immediate to not get excited about this coming season. I think it's going to be a good time, and I personally, Jonathan, I wouldn't mind a schedule like last year in terms of the layout of difficulty, just from the standpoint of I want to start the season with some cupcakes. Give me that easy start to the year, and then in December, end of November, December, start to ramp it up for these guys in terms of difficulty and talent level of the other teams, because I would love for them to be able to get into a rhythm. I just would hate more than anything for them to start the season with the gauntlet and just get beaten to the ground to the point where they just lose a lot of morale. I want to see them to absolutely run over some bottom teams in the league.
I'll tell you what. Let's take November and December's schedule from last year, where it was every other night or almost every night you were playing a playoff team or a team above 500. Let's push that to the February, March, April schedule. Let's beat up on all the bad teams early. Let's get that confidence up. Coming out of the All-Star break, let's get into a rhythm where the team should be peaking at that point. The goal is to get better over the course of the season. Peak at the right time. And then, let's look at March and April and be we have an actual legitimate chance to make the playoffs. Yeah. And I don't want to talk myself into, and I don't want to say on this podcast that I'm going to, guarantee the Magic are going to be a playoff team. Because that would be really bad. If it didn't happen, it would make me look very foolish. But and this is really the start and the end of my argument. The personnel on this roster and the culture that has been set in place and the emphasis that has been made on the defensive end, my whole argument is the Magic should be a top 10 defensive team next season. And historically, that points to teams being in the playoffs. So you have a team that should be top 10 defensively, should be much improved offensively, just with Markelle Fultz playing more, other guys improving and adding Paolo Banchero. Tell me why the Magic don't make the playoffs.